Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather updates. Another dry and bright day for most on Friday, perhaps a little more sunshine compared to today. Will be a bit of a chilly start, however, temperatures dropping quite sharply tonight. We've got high pressure out west and low pressure out east, and they're squeezing together to bring us northerly winds, and that's bringing the chill and also bringing quite a few showers across northern Scotland, and we'll see more through the evening and tonight coming down the eastern side of England, so from Durham down through Hull, Lincoln and towards Norwich. Some heavy showers possible. One or two scattered showers for North Wales and later in the night parts of Cornwall. Elsewhere, though, most places dry and clear, and it will be a chilly one. Temperatures down into single figures, well down in rural spots. But a bright start for south of Scotland, Northern Ireland, much of northern England, plenty of sunshine. Throughout the day, though, the east coast of England likely to see more cloud and showers along with northern Scotland. A few showers early on for Wales and southwest England, but they should fade away. For most places, dry and bright with sunny spells, but it isn't going to be warm with that northerly breeze. Temperatures in the high teens at best in the south and feeling much colder on these east coasts, on these eastern coasts with that strong and very bitter wind, actually. Now, those stiff winds will continue to bring some showers across eastern coastal counties and across northeast Scotland as we head into the weekend. Elsewhere, the winds are a little lighter. Cold start to Saturday. Could be a touch of frost in the countryside. And then generally a fine and sunny day on Saturday. Still a few showers just getting into North Norfolk, Aberdeenshire, Caithness, Sutherland. But otherwise, it's dry and bright on Saturday with plenty of blue sky. Just a bit on the fresh side with the temperatures below average for the time of year, generally only in the mid-teens. And again, feeling colder on that east coast with a brisk wind. High pressure moves in and then dominates through the weekend, so looking dry for Sunday and Monday, but we will see a bit more cloud moving in as we go through the weekend.
Critics of Britain and its monarchy are green with envy. That's the topic of my big opinion monologue. It's Mark Dolan in for the great Mark Steyn. But first, the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Good evening. It's 1 minute past 8. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Queen's coffin will be laid to rest in the Royal Vault alongside her husband, the late Duke of Edinburgh. Further details have been released on the Queen's funeral next Monday. The state gun carriage of the Royal Navy will carry Her Majesty's coffin from Westminster Hall to Westminster Abbey for the service, which starts at 11. A national 2-minute silence will be held at the end of the service just before noon. Events will then move west to Windsor, where a smaller service for close family will take place at St George's Chapel next to Windsor Castle. Downing Street has said 200 key workers and volunteers have been invited to attend the Queen's state funeral. The list of people from the Queen's birthday honours list will be joining other world leaders and dignitaries. Royal households from a select number of European countries, as well as the Emperor and Empress of Japan, have also announced plans to attend. Thousands of people have been queuing to pay their respects to the late Queen, who's lying in state in Westminster Hall. The King and royal family have expressed their gratitude for the condolence messages and tributes sent from people all over the world mourning the loss of Her Majesty. The queue of people visiting the Queen's lying in state is now almost 5 miles long, but some have said they simply couldn't miss it.
I was lucky enough to be on Horse Guards yesterday. I saw the coffin go by with the Imperial State Crown on it. It was just absolutely amazing with it glistening in the sunshine. But I thought, you know what, I want to go to that grandeur of the ancient Westminster Hall and really see it and give my final bow to my monarch.
The scenery is so gorgeous in London, walking along the South Bank. So it's actually been really pleasant, and we've had a lovely time, really, and looking forward to getting over the other side.
Just out of respect for the Queen, what she's not only done for the United Kingdom, but for the whole world. She was a figurehead from Canada, America, India. Everywhere she went, everybody adored her. And that's why we're here today to say one last goodbye.
Members of the royal family have been in various parts of the UK today looking at floral tributes left in memory of the late Queen Elizabeth. The Princess Royal and her husband have been welcomed to Glasgow, where their meeting organisation the Queen was a patron of. The Earl and Countess of Wessex have visited Manchester, where they've lit candles at the cathedral and looked at flowers left in St Anne's Square. Whilst the Prince and Princess of Wales have been at the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, where thousands of people turned up to greet them. Meanwhile, King Charles has spent the day carrying out state business at his Highgrove estate ahead of travelling to Wales tomorrow. The Treasury is reportedly considering scrapping restrictions on bankers' bonuses as part of a post-Brexit shake-up of the city. Newly appointed Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng is thought to be looking at changing the rules to make London more attractive for global banks. The European Union brought in the cap on bonuses, which is currently double a salary following the global financial crash in 2008. Mr Kwarteng is set to deliver a so-called mini-budget next week, as MPs are expected to return to the Commons after a period of mourning next Thursday. Ursula von der Leyen, European Commission President, says that Ukraine is well on its way towards EU membership. Von der Leyen says Ukraine is making quick and impressive progress and that the EU supports them in their request for the membership. They are planning to strengthen the partnership by improving and increasing Ukraine's electricity delivery to the European Union to create a steady income for Ukraine. Hundreds of mourners have said goodbye to Olivia Pratt-Corbell, who was shot at her home in Liverpool last month at a funeral service today. Olivia's family asked everyone attending the funeral to wear pink in her memory. Pupils and staff at her school did the same. The police are still searching for the killer. Rafa Nadal says it's been an honour and a privilege to share the same court as Roger Federer, who's announced his retirement from professional tennis. The 20-time Grand Slam champion, who struggled with an ongoing knee issue, says he'll finish his competitive career after next week's Rod Laver Cup. The 41-year-old Swiss has thanked his family and fans for their support.
As many of you know, the past 3 years have presented me with challenges in the form of injuries and surgeries. I've worked hard to return to full competitive form, but I also know my body's capacities and limits, and its message to me lately has been clear. I am 41 years old. I've played more than 1,500 matches over 24 years. Tennis has treated me more generously than I ever would have dreamt, and now I must recognize when it is time to end my competitive career.
TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
I'm Mark Dolan, in for the great Mark Steyn, who returns next week. Lots to get through in a busy hour. Should China have an invitation to the funeral on Monday? After all, they torture their own people and they caused the COVID-19 pandemic and the obfuscation and lies early on whilst the virus ran rampant across Wuhan and then across the world. We'll speak to Tory MP Tim Loughton, who's not a happy man. He's been banned and sanctioned by China himself. He thinks there should be no representation of China at the funeral on Monday. What's your view? GB Views at gbnews.uk. Also, we're going to talk about these attacks on the Queen, her legacy and our monarchy from America. What happened to the special relationship? We'll speak to renowned publisher and broadcaster A.J. Rice. Looking forward to that. Plus, we will speak to the doyen of royal reporting, the truly remarkable Jenny Bond. Jenny is live later in the show. She'll be talking about William and Harry having to follow the coffin in what is an eerie reminder of what happened to their mother in 1997. Plus, King Charles III finally gets a break, at least until Monday. We'll discuss all of that with Jenny Bond later in the show. I want to hear from you throughout the programme. GB Views at gbnews.uk. But let's start with this. So much for the special relationship. The sad passing of our great monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, has been met with cynicism and vitriol from academics, TV hosts and politicians from across the pond. Those in the United States with a political axe to grind and with division to sow are linking our iconic late Queen with Britain's colonial past, conveniently glossing over the fact that we have a constitutional monarchy in which the wearer of the crown wields no political power. They conveniently forget that Britain campaigned at huge economic and strategic cost to bring about the end of slavery decades before our friends in America did. And don't forget that post-war, we divested what remained of the British Empire and formed a community of nations that continues to this day, namely the Commonwealth, of which Elizabeth was head for 7 decades. There aren't too many imperial empires in history that formed a family of nations when they ended, but that is the British way. But there's more. There is so much that the Americans have forgotten. Meanwhile, they effectively had apartheid right up until the 1960s, before the civil rights movement changed that country for the better. People in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, and Britain-hating woke commentators stateside are guilty of eye-watering hypocrisy, given America's disastrous record on race relations, which continues to this day. America, we are not. Even the New York Times have been at it, peddling the empire narrative for clicks and complaining that, wait for it, the Queen's funeral will be paid for by taxpayers. Grasping at straws there, aren't we, fellas? Obviously, US presidents' funerals are also paid for by, you guessed it, US taxpayers. Those pesky facts, eh? Legendary US-based British historian Simon Sharma has called out this non-story. He tweeted, "The Queen's funeral will be paid for by British taxpayers. This so-called news is kind of pathetic. Take a poll, why don't you, and see how many are up in arms about it." Meanwhile, US magazine The Cut, to which Meghan Markle has just given a major interview, has launched an extraordinary assault on King Charles III, calling him a big, fussy baby and a jerk. They've got previous, of course. Shortly after the Queen's death, they published an article titled, "I Won't Cry Over the Death of a Violent Oppressor." The piece was an interview with linguistics professor Uju Anya, and she's got quite a way with words. She tweeted this on Thursday. "The chief monarch of a thieving, raping, genocidal empire is finally dying. May her pain be excruciating." Anya also told The Cut magazine that the Queen was a representative of the cult of white womanhood. What's that when it's at home? Whatever happened to, if you haven't got something nice to say nothing at all. Now, you obviously can say what you like. I am the king of free speech. Nothing is sacred in my book. But it's also my view that these comments about the Queen are part of an agenda to attack the values and traditions of the free world by self-loathing members of the political, corporate, academic and media elite. We've got a few here too. Now, I don't judge all Americans for this Anglophobia. It is the exclusive domain of hard-left ideologues who hate their own country and hate Britain too. Amid the outpouring of grief and respect we've seen from most Americans and from nations all over the world, these bitter, vindictive commentators, these crank yanks, as I like to call them, they hate everything. They hate free speech, they hate democracy, and they hate Western values. It's my view that they never want communities to come together and that division for them is an industry. Almost 200 presidents and prime ministers will be present at the Queen's funeral on Monday, demonstrating not just the huge affection for the British monarchy, but huge affection for Britain itself. This country is a global beacon of diversity, creativity, diplomacy and enterprise. And our constitutional monarchy is a key part of that success. As you'll see on Monday, most of the world gets it. The crank Yanks don't, probably because they're consumed with jealousy for what we've got. And our monarchy is nothing to be ashamed of. It is, in fact, our greatest treasure. So ignore the minority of haters in America and elsewhere. It's abundantly clear that the world loved the Queen just as much as we did. Are we facing a new era of Anglophobia? Let me know your thoughts. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Let's head straight to Washington in the United States and get the views of the renowned publicity expert and, of course, best-selling author of a brand new book, which is called The Woking Dead, which is America's most talked about book at the moment. It's AJ Rice. AJ, welcome to the show.
Brother Mark, it's good to be here. You know, I know you weren't looking for an Irish Catholic guy from Philadelphia to defend the Queen, but you've got one.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. What motivates these attacks on Britain's monarchy, AJ?
Look, you guys are getting a taste of it. I mean, this is who we are at. We are at, fighting the culture war with every day over here. I mean, you could have replaced, Queen Elizabeth's name with George Washington, and they would be saying the same thing. I mean, this is an attack. Look, she was a beacon of Western civilization, pluralism, commerce. So this is the attack that's going on stateside here. It goes on throughout the West and other places. It's an attack from entertainment, from the media, from certain big tech companies. She was a beacon for Western civilization. And isn't it interesting, these same people that are throwing shade at her over the last week, they were very upset to see Gorbachev go. Isn't that interesting? So Gorbachev's good, Elizabeth Windsor bad. I mean, these are the people here stateside that my clients, who you've had on, that my book talks about. Look, we're arm in arm in this, brother. So, I know you guys can take it, and we're there with you.
AJ, the people that are so critical of Britain and its past are the same people that loathe America's history too.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, this is, a group of people that, if you go throughout history, I mean, they are trying to systematically erase, even pre, 1776 America. I mean, it's the 1619 Project. It's all backed up by the social justice warriors that are looking for race and racism around every corner. But if I were the British people, and if I were the House of Windsor, I would say to the haters out there, you're welcome. Because quite frankly, the English-speaking world, led by, the UK, have brought more peace and prosperity and commerce and education and medicine and philanthropy than any other group of people on the planet. I mean, this woman fought the Nazis. She was a staunch Cold Warrior against the USSR. So to show up now like some kind of loose cannon from the humanities department of some institution, which a lot of these people are, some of them have TV gigs. So I would say you're welcome. I mean, look, this is the tyranny of the minority, though. Most people here, stateside, Canada, the English-speaking world, they recognize that she was a heroic icon. Yes, they had money, but nobody gave away more of it to help people when they did their Commonwealth tours than the royal family. So, I mean, don't sweat it. It's not all of us. I can't, vouch for some of the wackos on TV over here. But this is a smart audience. And this audience knows that it's not all of us.
Well, indeed not. Do you think this wave of Anglophobia could threaten the special relationship, AJ?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I've got a statue of Churchill behind me here, right next to a statue of Madison. So it's not going to look. This is the grievance mafia, right? This is the grievance group. They see her as some kind of, matriarchal white supremacy icon that has to be torn down. I mean, we've had a lot of them. Okay, they called the prior president the same thing. They attacked Thatcher. They attacked Reagan. They attacked Churchill this way. So mean, I know you guys have had some statues torn down there too. At the core of this is about recreating Western civilization in their image. And their image is bleak, it's grievous, and, you know, most Americans are happy warriors. Most British subjects are too. So we're not going to let these people drag this woman in through the mud. Forget it.
I wonder to what extent this Anglophobia is at a government level, because relations between the United Kingdom and Barack Obama, I thought, were quite frosty, especially towards the end when he was extremely critical around the forces that eventually made Brexit happen. I think he said that Britain would be at the back of the queue for a trade deal, which I think is a very insulting thing to say to a long-term ally. And relations between Biden and the UK are currently quite frosty too, particularly in relation to the Northern Ireland Protocol post-Brexit.
Sure. I mean, look, we had 8 years of Barack Obama, and their motto was lead from behind. And, you know, when he was elected, he went around the world apologizing for, you know, America's sins and Western civilization's sins. So, you know, I mean, you have to understand, the people around this current president, and quite frankly, pretty much Barack Obama too, maybe not Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter as much, these are radical people that have some sort of humanities degree or some sort of postmodern philosophy degree. They see England as a colonial power still. They see Israel as a colonial power. They see United States and Canada as it, even to this day. They're never going to be able to shake that. They've got this sort of, they've got, you know, sort of, I mean, it's wokeism, but at the same time, it's anti-Americanism, anti-British, you know, philosophies. And I got to tell you, they're after Churchill, they're after Columbus, but they don't really know England's history. They don't know the fact that you guys ended slavery with, you know, a vote, whereas we had to sacrifice 600,000 people to end slavery, North and South. So, look, they're not educated. They get their news from TikTok. So forgive them and their ignorance.
AJ, can America do business with King Charles III?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, Charles, you know, is, you know, he's got different priorities. I think, you know, the Biden administration might find an ally in some of his positions on things like climate change and some other issues. But look, I think Charles is going to be fine. You know, he's getting the crown at a later age. But, you know, I'm not going to throw any shade at Charles. I mean, I think Charles will do his duty, and I think there will be a continued, you know, special relationship from Charles. I mean, look, Princess Diana was loved here. It's a fact. But I think we've even moved beyond some of that. So, you know, I mean, obviously the tabloids are going to follow what the tabloids follow. But we can absolutely do business with Charles, 100%.
AJ, before you go, we'll speak at greater length in the future, but could you give me your elevator pitch for your best-selling new book, The Woking Dead? You describe wokeism as a virus. It's the book that all of America is talking about. Tell me more.
Look, it's a cultural virus. It's a cultural virus that is hammering the Queen right now. I mean, this is who we're fighting. It's some of it has been around a long time. It predates World War I. It's cultural Marxism, you know, the sort of long march through the institutions, because they knew here that they weren't going to be able to flip our workers into overthrowing the country like they did in Russia with the Romanovs. So we talk at great length about how to take back your country and how to push back against wokeism in the schools and in the entertainment business.
AJ, come and see us again soon. AJ Rice is the best-selling author of The Woking Dead, the most talked about political book in America today. Meanwhile, a group of Conservative MPs have condemned a decision to invite Chinese officials to the Queen's funeral next week, when representatives of Russia, Belarus and Myanmar have been banned. Parliamentarians who have been sanctioned themselves by Beijing, including Conservative MP Tim Loughton, are unhappy that China is not being blacklisted from the event, like other countries facing claims of human rights abuses. Following an invitation to President Xi Jinping of China, their Vice President Wang Qishan is set to attend the Westminster Abbey service on Monday. But MPs have criticised the invite just 18 months after the House of Commons declared that the Uyghurs and other minorities in China's Xinjiang region are being subjected to genocide. In just a moment, I'll speak to Spectator writer Cindy Yu, who says the Queen's funeral should not be politicised. But first, I'm delighted to welcome the aforementioned Conservative MP for East Worthing and Shoreham, Tim Loughton. Good evening, Mr. Loughton.
Good evening, Mark.
I would have thought you wear your sanctions from China with pride.
Well, it has been a badge of honour, those 7 parliamentarians. And let me make it clear, it's not just Conservative MPs complaining about this. The letter which I've sent today is on behalf of the other sanctionees, including Labour peers, Baroness Kennedy and David Alton as well, crossbench peers. So this is a crossbench approach in just the same way that it was a unanimous vote of the House of Commons earlier this year that recognised the genocide that China has been committing. So frankly, sanctioning the 7 of us, we wear the badge of honour, but it's been a huge recruiting sergeant for people coming out from the woodwork, now prepared to stand up to China, to call out to China and to challenge the huge abuses that they've been carrying on and continue to carry on, which is why they shouldn't be coming to the state funeral.
And there is, of course, Mr. Loughton, the small matter of China's lies and obfuscation at the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, that's just one of a series of things, which is why China is the most dangerous nation in the world at the moment. Not only the industrial scale human rights abuses against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, which have been exposed. They've been doing this for the last 60 years against the Tibetans, and the increasing suppression of people in Hong Kong, where they've completely torn up the Anglo-Chinese agreement when we handed back Hong Kong. They are infiltrating infrastructure projects across the world, which is why our government's had to legislate against them. Hawaii being involved in our 5G projects and others. They are infiltrating our university campuses, our schools through their Confucius institutes. And of course, they have never prepared to lay bare the facts about how the COVID pandemic actually started. This is a deeply dangerous nation, and to treat them on the same basis as other law-abiding states who are sending their presidents, their prime ministers and others, nations who recognise the international rule of law, know what it is and abide by it, they cannot be treated on the same basis, which is why, frankly, it's an insult to the Queen that they should have had the red carpet rolled out for them if they are going to be invited to come on Monday.
However, Tim Loughton, is this invitation not just an example of so-called realpolitik? We have to do business with the Chinese. We enjoy their cheap, high-quality manufactured goods, and we enjoy their investment as well.
Well, we have to do business with them, and I just wish that China would change its ways, because it's the second largest economy in the world. It's a fast-growing economy. It has a very key role to play. But all the time it's undermining Western nations. All the time it's taking control of crucial parts of the world economy. It's monopoly it's having on many rare earth minerals. The fact that the Chinese agencies own 104 ports across the world. They are hugely powerful. And they've done this because people haven't stood up for them against them in the past. We've welcomed their dollars, and we've turned a blind eye. That must stop, and it's begun to stop over the last few years, and people like me and others in the Parliament here and in the Senate and the States have called them out. But we must follow up those words with action, which is why the legislation that we passed is so important, which is why the restrictions we place on businesses operating in China from slave labour produced goods and others are so important, and we've got to go a lot further. And whilst all that's going on, and we need to go further, as I say, to allow the president of China or his representative to sit side by side with other Western leaders who actually do behave themselves, who are not guilty of something as heinous as genocide. We banned Russia, we banned Myanmar, we banned Belarus, the restrictions on various other countries. China should be on that same banned B list, frankly, and not allowed to have the red carpet rolled out for them and to attend Westminster Abbey, just 100 yards away from where their ambassador has been banned from coming to Parliament because we remain sanctioned purely for doing our jobs and speaking out.
Mr. Loughton, our new Prime Minister, as former Foreign Secretary, is well placed to act tough with China as Prime Minister. Will she?
Well, I hope so, because Liz Truss actually has a reputation for being much more sceptical about China and much tougher on China, and we really welcome that. So I don't know whether this invitation is as a result of cock-up or conspiracy, but frankly, I don't believe that Liz Truss believes that China should be treated on an equal basis with our allies. And I hope the government now will carefully consider the letter which four of us have written to the Foreign Secretary last night. We've also written to the Lord Speaker and the Commons Speaker, and see that actually this isn't right and that invitation should be rescinded. There's plenty of time to do that, and that would send out a very strong message to China that they cannot go on acting in the way that they have, and the world is watching.
Final question for you, Tim Loughton. Congratulations on having a new leader. I think we've all been put out of our misery now. I'm sure that Liz Truss enjoys your full support. Do you think that Parliament should sit early, ahead of schedule, in order to tackle the cost of living crisis?
Yes, and it is. So Parliament's coming back a week early on the 11th of October, I think, after the party conferences. And I think that's quite right. That's been announced earlier today, and I'm certainly in favour of that.
However, do you not think that we, with viewers at home struggling, worrying about their energy bills, worrying about inflation, need Parliament to act more swiftly than that? We're talking about October. That's a long time from now.
Well, the government announced last week, within 2 days of Liz Truss becoming the new Prime Minister, that it is going to bring in a very comprehensive, very substantial package of help to households and to businesses. That is going to come in a matter of weeks, because the energy cap starts to affect people from October. And it's also been announced that we're going to have a financial statement, a mini budget, if you like, this Friday before Parliament goes off for the conference sessions, which will put more detail on that and give reassurance to people. So the government has hit the ground running. The Prime Minister has got off to a good start. Goodness knows, with all these other things going on as well, we could do without. But I think the Prime Minister has actually needs some breathing space. She's started well, and people are going to hear the news in detail that we all need them to hear, and that is so crucial. So I'm very supportive of what she's done so far.
Tim Loughton MP, thank you so much for joining us on GB News. Look forward to catching up again in the near future. Let's now speak to Cindy Yu, broadcast editor at The Spectator magazine and host of the Chinese Whispers podcast. Cindy Yu, welcome to GB News. Do you think that China should be represented on Monday at the Queen's funeral?
Yes, I do think so. And, I listened to Tim's interview with great interest. I agree with him on a lot of what he said, which is that I also wish that China could be different, that it could be more respecting of human rights, that it would give the Uyghur people and the Hong Kong people much more breathing room than it is at the moment. But the Queen's funeral is not the place for that kind of campaigning, for that kind of activism, essentially. The Queen transcended domestic politics here in this country, but she was also a fantastic example of British soft power. She shook hands with authoritarians throughout her second 70 years in the throne, because she knew that was what she was meant to do. She transcended international politics too. And at her funeral is not the time to break that. Tim says that this would be disrespectful to the Queen, but actually, if it was in the British interest, the Queen would still visit China, and she was the first monarch to visit in China in 1986, in a very pivotal moment for Sino-British relations. I appreciate we're in a different moment now, but I don't think we should underestimate how much she transcends this kind of politicking.
Banning Chinese representatives from the funeral wouldn't be activism, it would be accountability.
In what way?
Well, China is responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic, lies about the outbreak, the origins of the virus, medics who spoke out and flagged up the arrival of the virus in Wuhan simply disappeared. The world is paying the price for Chinese lies and obfuscation. That's before we get to the treatment of the Uyghur Muslims and others.
Mark, everything you say is true, but I'm not sure how disinviting state representatives with whom we still have diplomatic relations is accountability. You know, I think we have to be realistic here. We're not going to be able to change the way that China does things, but we need to keep up diplomatic relations in a democratic way. So last I checked, we still had those relations with China. China still has an embassy in London. Last year, the integrated review from the British government stated that China was a strategic competitor, a challenge coming up for the British government, which is as it should be. But that doesn't mean disinviting them from every single thing, just deplatforming them from every single thing. And bearing in mind that the only 3 countries that have been disinvited are Belarus, Russia, and Myanmar. So either we are effectively at war with them, or we don't recognise the legitimacy of their government. We haven't disinvited other human rights abusers because this is not about that.
Or you could argue that China's crimes are almost as egregious as those of Russia as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, which could have been stemmed in Wuhan. We've effectively almost bankrupted the West.
Well, I think that depends on whether or not you think the Wuhan virus was deliberate or not. I think that the Chinese government was clearly caught off guard. It punished those local officials in Wuhan who covered it up very, very severely, actually.
It also punished those who spoke out and whistle blew that it was happening, Cindy Yu.
The pandemic than the Russians.
The whistleblowers, the COVID whistleblowers were also locked up or quietly disappeared.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Mark, I don't disagree with you. China does not behave in a way that respects human rights in a lot of the ways it does its domestic governance. I totally agree with you on that.
Isn't therefore, Cindy Yu, being denied the privilege of an invitation to our greatest monarch in history's funeral is the perfect bloody nose for this regime?
I really don't think China would very much care. And actually, what's interesting, and I noticed in your introduction you mentioned this, is that the Chinese actually want to play along with this because the rumours are that they are sending Vice President Wang Qishan to London later this week. And he is actually a key ally of Xi Jinping. He has known Xi Jinping since the Cultural Revolution when they were sent down to countryside together. So actually, that is a show of respect that the Chinese have actually always understood the importance of hereditary monarchy to the UK. And therefore, they are willing to play along and be diplomatic about it in a way that actually I don't really see some British MPs be. And Mark, if I may just say one more thing as well. You know, Tim was portraying as if it's a sanctioned or versus not sanctioned MP kind of thing. But actually, a few of the sanctioned MPs have kept quiet and they haven't actually campaigned against this. And some of them actually privately have said to me that they believe that they shouldn't be disinvited, that China should actually have a presence there. So, you know, it's not as if all sanctioned MPs are outraged about this. A few of them are, of course, but actually some of them still believe that we should have diplomatic relations with this country.
Cindy Yu, I always love reading your articles in The Spectator, and you are no apologist for the Chinese regime. Let me stress that. So what would your advice be, your considered thoughts about how we navigate our relations with China in the years to come? Because it's going to be difficult, isn't it? We've got to be good cop, bad cop. China is, in the view of many, an international bad actor, an unscrupulous and dishonest regime, but we also need their investment and we have to do business with them.
I'm afraid so. I mean, I'm afraid that there is no way you can not think about China. It is the second largest economy in the world. It may never make it to the biggest economy in the world with its own problems at home, but at the same time, you know, you can't just completely decouple from it. So with that as your assumption, I think we need to better understand the country. We need to have more funding in this country promoted by the government to create more China experts in this country. So that, you know thy enemy, right? You need to know what they're about. So that's the first thing. I also think that we need to move away from the performative part of things. So I think, for example, banning them from the funeral will be performative. It's not going to lead to any regime change or any policy change inside China. It's actually just going to be undiplomatic. So I think that's a kind of performative thing we need to move away from. And we also need to identify what is the parts we can do business with, what are the parts we don't want to do business with. So, for example, strategic industries like semiconductors, we should be very, very careful about that. When it comes to toys and clothes, you know, I'm more relaxed about it. So let's just be smart about it. Let's be constructive about it with the assumption that we are not going to get rid of China. And so we're going to have to keep thinking about them for the foreseeable future.
Cindy Yu, have China already won the world?
No, I don't think they have. I think 10 years ago, perhaps that looked more like a foregone conclusion. But actually, the Chinese problems now at home are really, really severe. So the government is facing an economic crisis on its hands. It may even be facing a recession this year. We'll never know from the official figures, but that is what some informed people are saying. And, you look at the housing market crash that is just about to happen. That is a third of the Chinese GDP. And there's just this boom from the real estate industry that has it just can't sustain itself, basically. So that's one problem. Zero COVID, as I was mentioning earlier, is actually a massive problem for the country. The vaccination rate is not nearly as good as we have it here in the UK for elderly, and therefore they can't open up. And so every few months or so, they have to shut down a giant economic hub like Shanghai, shooting themselves in the foot. So that's a massive problem. Then there's an aging population. China's population may even have peaked. So that's why I say I don't know if China will ever actually be the world's largest economy. But that doesn't mean that they're not dangerous or challenging. And that's why we in the UK have to be very, very smart about it.
A privilege to have you on the show, Cindy. Thank you so much for offering an alternative view. This programme is all about opinions and yours is most welcome. Cindy Yu is the host of the Chinese Whispers podcast and a regular contributor to the excellent Spectator magazine. What do you think? The emails are coming in thick and fast. China. Obviously, the Chinese guest praising the evil CCP regime is a spy. And COVID was not an accident. She's a liar and part of the regime. Well, look, David, I have certainly no evidence to prove that that's the case. And as I mentioned, on this show and on this channel, we want to hear all sides. And Cindy Yu has an alternative view, which, of course, is welcome. How about this? China, says Norma, if China can come, so can Russia and the others. China should not be invited. China has also been treating Christians very badly for years. Richard says, Mark, we should hit China where it hurts by making our own socks and pants, much else for ourselves, and stop being so enmeshed in the Chinese economy. Richard, what a good idea. I could do with some British boxer shorts. What a fabulous idea. The smiling face of tyranny, says John. Debbie says, good evening, Mark. What's wrong with this damn country? Have we forgiven China? Who invited him and his clan? We're not buying a single thing from that country. And what about all our friends and relatives that have died of their so-called virus? Absolutely boiling with rage is our Debbie on that one. However, Cindy Yu, wow, this lady speaks sense, says Brian. This programme is very much a broad church of opinion. How about this? We've spoken earlier, and I touched on it in my big opinion monologue, on the issue of these attacks from left-wing figures in the American media, having a go at the Queen, her legacy, the monarchy. I think they're green with envy. I think they'd love to have what we have, but strong views coming in on this. John says, Mark, I'm watching the show live. I just finished listening to the segments regarding US citizens who have maligned Her Majesty and Great Britain. I'm a US citizen who's embarrassed by the conduct of those individuals. Great Britain is my country's mother country. I'm grateful for the start that colonies received from England. Condolences on the death of Her Majesty. My earlier memory of the Queen is a television broadcast of her christening, of course, being christened QE2. My mother was very much a fan of the Queen and of the Queen Mother. So much more to come. We asked you earlier in the show if the American media have got a problem with Britain. Is the Pope Catholic, says Paula. Stephen says the UK has something the US will never have, and they don't like it, the monarchy and class. Elliot says most Americans seem to be very nice about the Queen's death, and the royal family in general, in my opinion. A couple of outliers bringing shame upon themselves shouldn't be considered representative of their entire nation. So there you go. Those are your views. Keep them coming thick and fast. Mark at gbnews.uk or gbviews at gbnews.uk. Lots more to get through. And of course, we have the small matter of the Queen's funeral on Monday, but a busy few days in the run-up to that very, very sad occasion. Today, King Charles finally gets a rest. A guard faints whilst standing vigil for the Queen in the last 24 hours. William and Harry have to follow the coffin of another loved one in an eerie echo of the past. Plus, Britain's got a new Prime Minister and a new monarch. Just how will that relationship play out? To discuss all of this is the doyen of British royal reporting, Jenny Bond. Hi, Jenny.
Hello there. Hi.
Jenny, great to have you on the programme. King Charles III finally gets a rest of sorts.
Well, he needed a day, didn't he? A day to gather his thoughts and to gather his feelings. I mean, the pace has been brutal. Obviously, being a royal correspondent, as I have for 30 years, I've known the blueprint of the arrangements for the Queen's funeral for a long time. What I didn't know, actually, is how it would impact on the new monarch, King Charles, and how he would be required to appear here, there and everywhere and fly up and down the country. Of course, no one had foreseen that the Queen would die at Balmoral, but it has been a bruising few days for him, but in which I think he has shown that he is intent on being very approachable, shaking hands, being allowed himself to be kissed or whatever in the crowds, moments of bad humour, bad temper, who wouldn't, quite frankly, but essentially he has been carrying out this, as he says, this heavy task of the duty that's been laid on him, being monarch, I think with great aplomb.
Yes, and we are enjoying live pictures of those standing in honour of Queen Elizabeth, late Queen Elizabeth II, and it's obviously very moving images. Of course, occasionally these guards run into trouble. The blood sugar level drops and they faint, which happened yesterday.
Yes, at any ceremonial, actually, you normally have at least one unfortunate guardsman who faints. You know, they're required to stand there 20 minutes at a time. That was unfortunate, but I don't think it will detract in any way from the grandeur of that situation, the solemnity of those people walking by and queuing for hours. I remember walking by the Queen Mother, actually, when she lay in state in 2002. And I was working more or less 24 hours a day, and I was across the road from Westminster Hall. And about 3 a.m, I think, now is my opportunity. And I managed to walk by. And it is a very special moment to do that. The hall itself is so ancient, so grand, so atmospheric, and the silence as you go in, the silence, just the footfall as you walk slowly towards the catafalque. It is a moment really worth experiencing and worth queuing 8 or 10 hours for, if you are so inclined.
I mean, are you surprised by the response? Clearly the nation is in mourning, but the numbers are truly spectacular, aren't they, of those willing to queue to pay their respects, Jenny?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. No, I thought that hundreds of thousands, 1 million, probably more than 1 million, would wish to do that. At the Queen Mother's funeral, the same applied. She was lying in state for 3 days, and it was the hall was meant to be closed at night, but in fact they had to keep it open, and they had to bring in all sorts of volunteers to bring hot drinks and food around because of the numbers of people that wanted to walk by. It's part of being there at a moment of historic significance, and if you cared about the Queen or the Queen Mother, but particularly the monarch, just that instant when you can feel you have a second or two for you and her, which is incredibly special and will be seared on your memory, I think, for life.
Indeed so. And I think what we're seeing, it might have surprised some Republicans, which is just the level of support for our monarchy, Jenny. I wonder whether this country is made up of millions of silent royalists.
I don't think they're so silent. Honestly, through her 70-year reign, the opinion polls consistently showed about 70% rate of popularity for her. And that's astonishing. What politician could ever dream of sustaining that kind of level of popularity? It's fallen a little bit in the last couple of years, in the 60%, but still phenomenal support. And unfortunately for the Republicans, I'm neither here nor there on that matter, but they never seem to get much beyond 23% of the popular vote of those who answer these opinion polls. So they're pretty static. I mean, they have every right to feel as they feel, but I think even they would concede, and those that I know have always said they too respect the woman that the Queen was and the job that she carried out for 17 years. They really do admire.
And Jenny, there doesn't seem to be a type of royal supporter. We have a very diverse country, and it seems that people of all ages and backgrounds are paying their respects.
Yeah, that's obvious from the people you see filing past, young and old, babies in arms occasionally, even though the queue is some, 4 or 8 hours. Yes, all ethnic origins there. It's lovely to see, actually. I think it's just something that is uniting the nation. And I think King Charles actually has taken the earliest opportunity to show that the union is very important to him, obviously, and thus he has been in Scotland, because that's where the Queen died. But in Scotland, there was the St Giles Cathedral service of Thanksgiving. And then also down, obviously, in London, he's going to Belfast. He's been to Belfast, going to Wales tomorrow, making a real point that this is a united kingdom. And I do think we're seeing the unity of the kingdom in our appraisal of the Queen's life and our show of affection for a lady who was, I knew her a little bit, and she was pretty wonderful.
Yes, having reported on the Queen for your tenure at the BBC, and as you say, having essentially interacted with her, been in her presence, is there anything about the Queen that you discovered that we don't know?
There have been so many stories, haven't there, that I probably can't better any of them. But I do think one moment where I did make her enjoy herself just a little bit at a reception, because how boring is it to shake all those hands and talk to people you don't really want to talk to? Oh God, journalists, how awful, I've got to talk to journalists. So I would try to make her laugh a little bit, and I did tell her about what a cracking figure she'd had, because I'd been looking at an exhibition of wedding dresses, and hers was there, and she had this tiny little waist. And so I said, wow, man, you had a cracking figure. And you don't normally say that to the Queen. And I think she quite enjoyed that. So I know she had a sense of humour, and I know she had a dazzling smile, which we saw almost to the very last day of her life when she appointed Liz Truss as her 15th Prime Minister. She was there. And do you know why she was there? She was there because she enjoyed being Queen.
Well, there you go. Well, look, you are the Queen of royal reporting in this country. If anyone can be cheeky with our monarch, I think it's you. You know Charles as well. Were you surprised by his Pengate moments when the fountain pen leaked? A degree of irritation, caught on camera, watched by millions. Is that a good or a bad look for our new king?
It's unfortunate, obviously, but he's known to have quite a hot temper. He does like things to run like clockwork. And yeah, it didn't look good, but I would, in his defence, say that what strain he's been under. He's lost his mother. He's had no opportunity, really, to mourn her privately. It's been one thing after another, one service after another, one plane ride after another, one formal duty after another. And, you know, when you get your hand covered in ink, it probably is very annoying. Yes, unfortunate, but I really don't think we should make too much of a deal about it. Let's think instead about the time he has taken out to shake people's hands, to be in the crowds, when he didn't have to. He could have come down to Buckingham Palace and just got out of the car, done a little wave and walked in. People would have understood that. But no, for about 20 minutes, I think, he went amongst the people and shook their hands and talked to them. And he's done that everywhere. So let's make not too big a thing about a temper over a leaky pen.
Well, that's right. And I think it shows he's human. It shows he's a perfectionist. You know the man better than I do, but he is, isn't he, Jenny Bond, a well-reported workaholic, a huge sense of duty. Now he's our new king. The Queen was box office, wasn't she, wherever she went in the world. Do you think that Charles is box office too?
Probably not to the same degree. I think maybe being a man isn't quite as interesting as being a woman, you know.
I'd agree with that.
I hated being asked by fellow reporters, oh, what's the Queen wearing? What shade of green is that? Because I hated that, because I didn't think it mattered.
No.
But perhaps it does add a little bit of charisma. But I've been very pleased to see the warmth a feeling towards King Charles. I've always maintained he'd make a great king, and I've resisted the public opinion I've come across during the Badges, the Diana years, and subsequently that he should not be king, he wasn't worthy to be king, that it should pass to his son William. No, he's a compassionate man, he's a well-trained future king and now king himself. And I think he will do his very best to carry out what he himself describes as this heavy task to his best of his ability.
A quick word on William and Harry, Jenny Bond, who in an eerie echo of history had to follow the coffin of another loved one, this time their grandmother.
Really tough for them. You couldn't watch those pictures without thinking about yourself to exactly 25 years ago, the same month of the year, 25 years ago, walking behind the coffin of their darling mother, Diana. And to be made to do it again, to required to do it again was, well, as William himself said today, it was challenging. It brought back a lot of memories. There's a lot of hurt there, a lot of grief. But they had to do it. That's the name of the game when you're in the public eye like that. And didn't they do it in a dignified manner and shoulder to shoulder at last? Whether that brief reconciliation that we saw or the reunion that we saw actually will lead to any meaningful reconciliation, well, I just don't know. There's a long way to go, but at least they're physically in the same place.
Let's look to the future, Jenny. We have a brand new Prime Minister in Liz Truss, and we have a new monarch, a new king, King Charles III. How important is that relationship, the relationship between our head of government and our head of state?
Well, from every Prime Minister I've spoken to, it's very important. Tony Blair once said quite famously, there's only two people that I can tell everything to. One's the wife and the other's the Queen. You can't confide in people when you have matters of state like that. And they do sit down, they discuss things constitutionally, and we have an unwritten constitution, so it's a bit flabby, if you like. But essentially, the monarch can warn, encourage and be consulted. And I think Charles perhaps will take more of an opportunity to warn and encourage on matters that he feels very, very strongly about than his mother, the Queen, did. But I think Liz Truss will find that those moments, those audiences with just the two of them in the room will be very valuable. Because you have to remember that we all talk about the wisdom of the Queen. Yes, I know she'd been there 70 years and she had massive experience in international relations, but Charles too has been around a long time and has had the same diplomatic training, if you like. So I think he will be a valuable sounding board for Liz Truss.
Jenny Bond, we really got our money's worth tonight. What a treat to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. We know how busy you are. Jenny Bond, the doyenne of royal broadcasting and reporting. Well, we're almost done with the show. Let me get to some of your feedback. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Dan Wootton is on the way, but this from Jack. Good evening, Mark. I firmly believe our late Queen is one of the greatest monarchs this country has ever known. What's even more remarkable is how caring and humble she was when she was in a position where most of us would have been the opposite. She rose above politics and always strived to bring people together and see the best in everyone. For that reason, we should invite Xi to attend the funeral and to maintain dialogue with leaders around the world, even those who appear to be against us. How about this on Charles and the Queen Consort, Camilla? Mark, you've all got short memories, because if Charles had learned to keep it in his pants and Camilla had learned to say no, Princess Diana would still be alive. No way should they be king and queen. That's Melanie's strong view. And finally, Daniel, on attacks from the American left on our monarchy. Mark, this proves that the left-wing socialist parties are the biggest racists and troublemakers. The likes of Donald Trump, Ronald Reagan or George Bush Sr. would never have come out with these nasty comments regarding the late, great Queen Elizabeth II. It's been a privilege to have your company for the last hour. The brilliant Mark Steyn is back next week, so thank you so much for your company tonight. Do stick around, because my friend, Britain's best journalist, Dan Wootton, is next. First up, here's a bit of weather for you.
Good evening. I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather updates. Another dry and bright day for most on Friday. Perhaps a little more sunshine compared to today. Will be a bit of a chilly